a Fortron production.
The Jimi Hendrix experience is over. The acid rock musician died today in a London hospital, apparently from an overdose of drugs. The death of another rock musician was disclosed today. Jim Morrison, 27 years old, lead singer of The Doors. His manager said Morrison died 6 days ago in Paris, either of a heart attack or pneumonia. But the death was kept secret to avoid a sensation.
Kurt Cobain, the lead singer of the enormously popular rock band Nirvana, is dead at the age of 27. More now from NBC's Brian Williams.
The international music industry is in shock with the death of rock star Michael Hutchence. The body of the INXS lead singer was discovered in a Sydney hotel room late this morning.
The Hollywood coroner says an overdose of narcotics is responsible for the death of the well-known rock singer Janis Joplin. Ms. Joplin was found dead in her bedroom last night.
Exactly what happened inside the iconic Beverly Hilton remains a mystery. Paramedics raced to the fourth floor and found a lifeless Whitney Houston inside her hotel room bathtub.
Both the Los Angeles Times and CBS News are both now reporting that Michael Jackson has died.
Think about this for a moment. When an artist signs his name on the dotted line to a record company, the record company will in many cases own all of the masters for the songs recorded under that contract. And when an artist signs to a major label, it's safe to say that their death is in many ways factored into the initial investment. And in many ways, after an artist has peaked in popularity, there becomes an awkward point in their career where the artist is worth more to them dead than alive.
Mad at him due to the business that he did.
Yeah.
And I can't even say mad, is that they didn't have a part of it. Let's be real. I'm gonna say it out there straight for everybody listening. My uncle didn't die. He was murdered. I feel the same thing about Prince. We're losing a lot of stars because you have to remember, these are basically insurance policies. When he dies, whatever was owned by the company reverts back. We're not talking about $100,000. We're not talking about $1 million. We're talking about billions of dollars. Notice that when my uncle dies, why do you hear all his music? Why is there a Motown cartoon out now? Okay, well, obviously when my uncle was alive, he wasn't giving the rights to anybody. But when he dies, all of a sudden.
Have you seen Nick since you got here?
No, sir.
He does not know you're here at all, correct?
No, sir.
But you have been in contact with him, I understand, pretty much on a daily basis, right?
Yes, sir.
Tell me what your assessment is of where he is mentally, emotionally.
Nicholas is at a breaking point. He still has not gotten over the fact that he was not able to revive Whitney. He cannot bear not being with Chrissy by her side. He has blamed himself for her being in the condition that she's in. He's torn up by that. He's dealing with it by drinking. I have begged him, I've instructed him to stop. It doesn't help.
So I have an understanding, and I want to be sure that I'm clear about this. Your son has known Chrissy from a very young age.
Yes, sir. She was 12.
At what point did he actually begin to live with Whitney and Chrissy?
Nicholas turned 18 in May. I believe he started living with Whitney and Bobby Christina during 2008 after his 18th birthday.
But they had been very close for a long time.
Correct.
My life changed dramatically when I met Chrissy and Whitney. I was going to high school. My mom had kicked me out of the house. Chrissy being my friend, I got to know Whitney. She took me in.
We were best friends long ago.
But this was not a romantic relationship between the two of them.
No, sir, they were friends.
It was just very friendly, kind of a brother-sister kind of support.
Yes,
of one another, just friends, always being there for each other.
Yes.
But then around 18, he started to actually reside and travel with them as well, right?
Yes, sir.
It really bothers me that everybody has our relationship screwed up. I was never adopted, nor am I her blood brother. We just really care about each other.
It was never anything that these people are saying that is incest, none of that. And now I'm in love with him.
When the situation with Whitney took place, what was his involvement with her that night?
With the
with
death
Whitney, yes, with her death.
He, as far as from what I understand, he wasn't. I don't believe he was on the floor in the hotel. I think he was maybe in his room, and he heard the assistant scream, and he ran into the room and saw Whitney lying there.
The body of the 48-year-old singer was found in her hotel room at the Beverly Hilton.
Whitney's entourage was just a few steps away as she was dying in a bathtub for a reported 30 minutes.
When she was found by her assistant and her assistant screamed out, Nick Gordon came running, saw the scene of Whitney on the floor, unconscious. Nick claims that he tried to administer CPR.
My understanding is that she was pulled out by somebody or persons on her staff prior to any paramedics or hotel security arriving on scene.
So he came in and she was in the tub.
She at that point she was on the floor, and he administered CPR to her, and he called me when he was standing in front of her body.
And what did he say to you?
He just couldn't understand why he couldn't revive her.
What did he say?
He just said, "Mommy, why couldn't I do CPR on her? I couldn't get the air in her lungs."
Paramedics showed up here at the Beverly Hilton and tried to resuscitate her.
12 minutes later, 3:55 p.m., the 48-year-old singer is pronounced dead.
The final cause of death has been established as drowning due to heart disease and cocaine use.
Just on the eve of Bobby Christina's 22nd birthday, Nick posted that he was so hurt he was going to hurt himself. He's threatened to take his life. He's a young man who is under a huge amount of stress, who's under the influence of drugs and drink in an incredibly difficult time of his life. He is a very, very troubled man right now.
And Nicholas is at a breaking point. He cannot take too much more of not being able to see Chrissy. He has blamed himself for her being in the condition that she's in.
When you say Chrissy, you mean Bobby Christina?
Yes, sir.
I can imagine it was difficult for him that night. What did he tell you about this?
The incident? Chrissy, Nick, and Max went out Friday night, and they went to a party or a club, and they were drinking. They got home very early in the morning on Saturday. Chrissy and Nick had an argument. Nick walked away from the argument, went to another bedroom to fall asleep, and Chrissy went up to her room and drew a bath, not as to take a bubble bath. From what I understand, from what Nick's telling me, the cable guy came over, Max left the cable guy in the house, and he needed to enter into the bathroom for some kind of access, and Max found her. He pulled her out of the tub, and he doesn't know how to do CPR. So he went to get Nicholas, and Nicholas was able to do the CPR on her for 15 minutes.
I'm surprised, thorough fellow like yourself. Why stop at one sister when you could have fucked them both?
Jesus loves me. Oh, yes, he does. For the Bible tells me so.
I hate her.
Masturbated on the bed.
What's the name of the bar?
I'm not sure.
I was very stoned.
Masturbated on the bed.
No, stop!
Masturbated on the bed.
It's you that sent in the letters. Okay, we don't need you to admit it. We know it.
No.
We know it.
Slipped into the bathtub. She's flipped over and she's face down underwater. And I think before we went on the air, you said the temperature of the water?
This is perplexing. This is the one thing that got me. When she was declared dead at 3:46 in the afternoon, the temperature of the water was not taken until later that night at 9:35 p.m. and it was 93.5 degrees 6 hours after she was declared dead.
How is that even possible? Can you... is that like a self-heating bathtub?
This, according to the detective at the scene who actually took the temperature of the water, and whilst he says there were no signs of foul play, that is an unanswered question, and I feel that this report really provides more questions than it does answers.
I completely agree with you. Now, Shelley, before we get into the autopsy report here, the spoon at the bedside, you think it was like a little spoon that she's using to spoon cocaine into her nose?
Yes, I would say so.
It's not a spoon that she's using to heat up and do something else with it.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I'm sure it had something to do with cocaine.
Right.
And a deviated septum as well was found.
Not a deviated septum, a perforated septum. Perforated septum. So I want everyone to know at home exactly how I read this autopsy report. Here's what we see. Perforated nasal septum. The septum, the thing that separates the two nostrils in your nose, dissolved. It gets dissolved by long-standing chronic use of cocaine. Number 2, she had emphysema from cigarette smoking, undoubtedly. Number 3, she had something called a fatty liver, which is something you get from drinking a lot, and you have to drink fairly recently. We found cannabis in her system. We find cocaine in her system. Everyone knows that. Now, this theory that she had some kind of heart problem, I take issue with that. She had mild, let me say, not even mild, minimal heart disease on this autopsy report. 60% coronary artery stenosis is something that no doctor would ever do anything with because it's harmless. You would watch it over the next 10 to 20 years. Now, the theory they're trying to promulgate is that she must have had a rhythm disturbance in her heart or maybe a clot that formed in one of those arteries and then dissolved, neither of which is there any evidence of in this report. That's a pure guess about what happened to her. But I say there's some other clue in here, her being upside down in the bathtub, and the fact, Shelley, you tell me if this suggests the same thing to you. Low levels of Xanax in her blood, in spite of empty pill bottles at her bedside, which should have had large amounts of Xanax in it. How do you put that all together?
I think that, what we're looking at is possibly some sort of seizure that created her to flip over and unconscious. If you're in the face down in the water and you've had a seizure, you're unconscious.
Here's a way to induce a seizure. She induced a seizure by not taking Xanax after having been on it for a period of time. The blood levels go low, seizure goes up. Yep. Cocaine induces seizure as well. Cannabis is of no help here. So she's on all these things that can create seizure. Everything looks like she had a seizure, and they're saying heart disease.
And booze was found in the room as well.
Not only, but she had no booze in her blood, which is another thing that can cause seizure, is the booze coming out of your system. So she may have been trying to get off some of these things and needed more medical supervision. It's kind of crazy.
This question, though. This provides, as I said earlier, more questions than it does answers.
Absolutely.
But is this uncommon? In instances whereby the full report is released, that we're asking more questions.
I got to tell you, in my...
Is there any way to determine if she did have a seizure?
No, not that I know of. Unless I'm not a pathologist, maybe they have. So, you know what? There's enzymes, there are muscle enzymes you can test for that might be up in her blood system if she broke down muscle from seizing so much. That's
an important thing to note, and we don't want to feed into the conspiracy theories. This is the report from the County of Los Angeles Department of Coroner. The Beverly Hills Police Department is still doing its own investigation, has said all along that they will close this case on receipt of this report. That hasn't happened just yet.
I don't think they should close it because this still leaves open the possibility of foul play. This weird, super hot water.
Hot water is
that's
very
perplexing.
odd. That's very odd.
How hot was it 6 hours before? And staying hot all day? There must be an explanation for that. I don't know what that is. But face down, lots of cocaine around her, cocaine in her system, and low levels of the other substances that she clearly had been using because she has empty bottles of large amounts of this.
Going into a bathtub that has hot water, would that be a contributing factor to bring on a seizure?
No, not in my...
No?
Not that I'm aware of anyway. Shelley, you had experience with that?
No experience.
Do you interpret this any differently than I do?
No, I think that the combination, obviously, between the low levels of Xanax and the high levels of cocaine can create what we're talking about. Because that's the only thing that makes sense that you would be upside down in a bathtub.
And let's be fair, we're talking. Shelley and I are accustomed to talking about this as though we're talking about some abstract person. You know, this is someone that everybody loved. This was a mother. This is a very sad story. And
into the story of Bobby Fuller. After Fuller moved to LA in 1964, he was signed to a record label by the name of Del-Fi Records, owned by producer Bob Keane. Keane was also the band's manager, and given the fact that it was called the Bobby Fuller 4, Bobby was the frontman. Shortly after the band had scored several hits, like their cover of I Fought the Law, on July 18, 1966, Bobby's success in the music industry would be cut short. After receiving a mysterious phone call in the early hours of the morning, Bobby was believed to have left his Los Angeles apartment at 3 a.m. Before Bobby left, his road manager had been half asleep watching TV in the living room. He vaguely remembered that Bobby might have been going to see a girl named Melody that night. After heading out from the apartment, he took his mother's Oldsmobile, and he would set off into the night. As the day turned to morning, Bobby failed to meet up with the other members of his band for rehearsal later that day. Around 5 p.m., a couple other visiting musicians had come to see Bobby at his apartment. They claimed that when they were driving up, Bobby's mother's car was not there. Bobby's mother, Lorraine, also noted this. She had been keeping an eye out all day for Bobby to come home. After the two visitors came into Bobby's apartment, Bobby's mom then went to go get the mail. To her surprise, the car was there. Upon closer inspection, she found Bobby lifeless inside of the car. He was found lying across the seat, where the entire car reeked of the smell of gasoline. There was a 2.5-gallon gas can found below the driver's seat, and a gas hose was also found nearby. Upon discovering Bobby in this state, Lorraine called the police. And when they arrived, they took a quick look at the body, and they ruled that Bobby had taken his own life from drinking gasoline. The authorities quickly discarded the gas can and called it a day. The car was never dusted for prints, the police didn't interview anybody, and all in all, it was an open and shut case. Later, it would be revealed through the autopsy that there was no gasoline found in Bobby's stomach, where the coroner later stated that Bobby had died due to inhalation of gasoline fumes, classifying Bobby's death instead as an accident, a finding that nobody, not least his own mother and family, agreed. Multiple witnesses noted that it appeared that Bobby had been beaten up badly and had a broken finger. There was blood found on his shirt and face. Multiple witnesses, including Lorraine, also made the comment that it looked like he had been dragged on the ground, and his body showed various scrapes and injuries. The coroner claims that they were mistaken. He claimed he found no bruises, no broken bones, and no cuts, or evidence of a beating. Instead stating, "Body in full rigor, skin slip due to high temperature in car." Bobby's body had been found in a full state of rigor mortis, meaning that he had been dead for some time. Considering that the car hadn't been in the lot for more than 15 minutes, this quite literally made it impossible that he could have driven up on his own. Given the sheer amount of gasoline found in the car, it appeared that someone had been just moments away from setting it ablaze. According to an article from Spin magazine, in 1983, Rick Stone reported that he was sure Bobby's head had been doused with gasoline. To this day, Jim Reese maintains that he saw a half-burned book of matches and a burn on the vinyl of the backseat of the car. Assuming the car failed to light, this meant that the persons responsible were lurking nearby. Rather interesting when you factor in that Bob Keane had just so happened to magically appear at the scene within moments. Now, Bobby's story is essentially a cautionary tale of what can happen in the music industry. And to quote Rod Crosby, the lead singer for the band The Intruders, Bobby Fuller was vulnerable by virtue of his honesty and naivety. If he had been a streetwise, bitter person, maybe he would have survived. He lived on a high plane of idealism and fantasy. He was swept into the maelstrom of rock decadence and was a victim of a ruthless business. Essentially, Bobby had become worth more dead than alive behind the scenes. He had a life insurance policy taken out on him for about $850,000, while all of the other members of the band had policies at around $100,000 each. In the days before his death, the band was on the verge of breaking up. One member was getting ready to return to his family after touring. Another member was likely to have been drafted into Vietnam. Infighting was rampant, leading to Bobby replacing one of the members, and the two musicians from earlier were new potential replacements for his current band. Essentially, Bobby Fuller had had enough of his management, between them failing to fulfill orders for his recent single, and the fact that Bob Keane had been micromanaging their sound, often making artistic decisions which led to their worst financial failure, the Magic Touch, which in spite of heavy promotion through payola, it still was not a commercial success. But that wasn't the only financial problem going on behind the scenes. The label had wanted Bobby to continue touring. He decided to bail on that. Had Bobby walked away, the label would have presumably incurred a large financial loss between the recent failure of the Magic Touch and the tour that was cut short. But if he were to conveniently die in an accident, let's say a mysterious car fire, then the label could easily turn a profit. Had the coroner ruled it being self-inflicted, the label would not have been able to collect due to a common clause in life insurance policies. Then in the months after, the coroner switched the death ruling to an accident. Conveniently, this was the most lucrative outcome for the label. Now clearly there was something off about the way the police and the coroner handled this case. I should add that the police have never once refuted the timeline of events I've shared with you. But if you are a frequent viewer of this channel, you know that all too often when you see this type of behavior from officials, it's usually a pretty big hint that you're dealing with matters pertaining to organized crime. Additionally, in Bobby's case, when two private investigators were hired to look into his death, both of them quickly quit the case. Both refused to talk to the press, and one had claimed that they had been threatened. In the days after Fuller's death, three mysterious tough guy types showed up outside the apartment of another band member, Jim Reese. They had essentially broken into his apartment only to find that he wasn't there. Jim to this day swore he had no idea who they were, but it definitely concerned members of the group to the point that they were thinking that they could have been next. It goes without saying that the circumstances surrounding Bobby Fuller's passing are very questionable. But it's worth pointing out that had things gone a bit differently with Bobby Fuller's mother not keeping an eye out that entire day, then it would be much harder to argue the mysterious circumstances surrounding his death. This entire situation, given the facts available, reeks of a botched, contrived accident. I think some people think that the whole Jeffrey Epstein suicided thing is just some one-off meme, but I should let you know that this is a very real tactic used by organizations like the CIA to take out targets under secretive conditions. They quite literally wrote the book on this. For secret hits, either simple or chase, the contrived accident is the most effective technique. When successfully executed, it causes little excitement and is only casually investigated. On that note, when you understand the full potential of something like a contrived accident, it's very difficult not to be a conspiracy theorist in the music industry, especially given the fact that historically this industry has had ties to organized crime since the very beginning. And as long as humans are corrupt, I would say that those people will continue to rise to the top in those businesses, whether it be the same set of powers that be or another. When a contrived accident is orchestrated correctly, it can be difficult for the general public to understand what they're looking at as a hit. Oftentimes, people won't think twice to question someone who's labeled a junkie or depressed. But you should know that staging of these particular incidents is definitely a real thing that goes on. But don't take my word for it, the CIA will tell you themselves. An overdose of administered as a sedative will cause death without disturbance and is difficult to detect. The size of the dose will depend upon whether the subject has been using regularly. If not, 2 grains will suffice.
Also, I had to find, one time they wanted me to find out if there was such a thing as a poison that was undetectable, especially one that seemed to mimic a heart attack, that would kill someone, but it would appear that they had a heart attack. I did find such a thing.
Does this pistol fire the dart?
Yes, it does, Mr. Chairman, and a special one was developed which
potentially would be able to enter the target without perception.
The poison was frozen into some sort of dart, and then it was shot at very high speed into the person. So when it reached the person, it would melt inside them, and the only thing would be like one little tiny red dot on their body, which was hard to detect. There wouldn't be a needle left or anything like that in the person.
But also the toxin itself would not appear in the autopsy? Yes, so that there was no way of perceiving that the target was him.
We now know what caused the death of singer Whitney Houston. She was, of course, found dead in a hotel bathtub last month. On Thursday, coroner's officials said she drowned accidentally. Houston also had at least 5 different drugs in her system, and also, we've learned, had heart disease.
Medical correspondent John LaPook is here with a closer look. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, I think we know that she had drowning, and they're saying she had atherosclerosis, which means that she had some clogging of the arteries, some narrowing, and that she also had cocaine. The question is, how did they all combine to kill her? I think that the fascinating thing here is that somebody can have absolutely perfectly normal heart. She didn't, but a perfectly normal heart, and have cocaine, and it can kill them by causing spasm and increased clotting. And there's an amazing stat that I learned last night that just blew me away. If you take cocaine, the odds in the next 60 minutes of you having a heart attack go up 24 times, 2,400%.
Wow.
And so what about the water in her lungs and that kind of thing that would indicate drowning?
Well, you know, one of the things, there's no camera there, so we don't know exactly what happened. And these pathologists, I don't really envy them, have to try to piece together this story. So you get water in your lungs if you're breathing. So how did she get water in her lungs? Well, she either had a heart attack and slipped into the water, and she still had a few breaths, and in they came, or she blacked out. Maybe she was unconscious because of a combination of the cocaine and these other medications, which they're saying did not contribute.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you about. And among those other medications, Xanax, which we've talked about recently on this program, Benadryl, something called Flexeril, and they said specifically these other drugs did not contribute to her death. Right. How do you know, I mean, as a pathologist, you're the coroner, you're looking at it, that they didn't play any role?
I spoke to one of the assistants in the coroner's office last night who was part of this investigation. I specifically asked that question. You have Flexeril, which is a muscle it relaxes your muscles. Xanax, which is anti-anxiety. You have Benadryl, which is an antihistamine. Each one of these can kind of space you out a little bit. And then all together, they can have an effect. Now, he specifically said, and this is a new information that he told me last night, that the levels of those were either therapeutic or subtherapeutic. But then I said to him, okay, fine, they're therapeutic, but then in combination, can't they have an additive effect? He said, well, we're going to have to wait 2 weeks to see what the final report shows about that.
So maybe it's not 100% that they didn't contribute.
Well, they're saying they didn't contribute. And the last thing they need is some doctor 3,000 miles away second-guessing them.
Or some idiot who has no medical degree questioning it, but I'm just trying to put together the words there to fully understand it.
Man, I love your show. I like what you're doing. Really. Thank you. Right? That's why I came here. Fresh out of jail, I'll come check you out, right?
Right.
Why the bulletproof vest?
Oh, it's not. Oh, no, that's just, it's the new style. You've been in the can for a while. This is what everybody, that's what all the talk show hosts are wearing.
This is a new thing, right?
Yeah.
See, if somebody going to do something about it, see, technology is so high, right?
Right.
So if you shoot somebody, you go to jail forever. So the kids, you don't want to go to jail forever, right? So they got this new thing out there. People sell them all the time. They got this stuff they get blood from somebody with AIDS. Yeah. And then they shoot you with it.
Oh, so that seems bad.
That's a slow death.
Yeah.
An easy thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, no. Okay.
Now, as you can imagine, Suge Knight's statement here obviously put him at the center of a conspiracy surrounding Eazy-E. While some people question the possibility of such a plot, others have pointed out that the rate at which Eazy-E went from being diagnosed to passing away was incredibly quickly. Now, while various people have shared their opinions throughout the years regarding that conspiracy, what's incredibly interesting about Suge Knight's statement is that it shows a familiarity with the contrived accident. So with
the California Highway Patrol is recommending that actress-singer Brandy be charged with misdemeanor vehicular manslaughter in a freeway crash that killed a motorist last December in Los Angeles. The recommendation comes after a CHP probe of the incident. Police say 27-year-old performer Brandy Norwood was driving her SUV on an LA freeway on December 30 last year when she rear-ended a car driven by Awatef Abudahaj. Abudahaj, seen here in a photo with her husband, died a day later from injuries suffered in the crash.